But yeah, let's get started. So the first topic tonight, okay, is the first topic tonight is about using ladder drills. And so I wrote an article. It's on my blog at lacrossegoalieuniversity.com. It's like the 7 drills that are a waste of time for lacrosse goalies, and ladder drills are in there. But I just thought I'd reiterate this because I have seen more and more of this kind of spring back up, and like I just I want people to understand that there's a couple positions that we can take on these. So one is um, so I believe I just want to give you kind of my fundamental philosophy when it comes to training anything. It's either we're creating great habits or we're creating bad habits. There's nothing in between. Okay, so we're creating great habits or we're creating bad habits. So that's the first rule. The second rule is that when you're developing athletes, like we talked about this week, like we're developing athletes who are playing the lacrosse goalie position. Okay, so that's those are the two main tenets I want to start with here. So the problem arises is that when a coach has a kid in the cage and that kid is like not that athletic. Okay, so that's one reason. So the coach is going like, how do I work with this? Like you're like a sculptor working with mud and not clay, right? You're like, dude, you're like the most unathletic thing I've ever seen. We got to figure out a way to make you athletic. And you've heard me say, like, it's very difficult to make a goalie into an athlete, but we can take an athlete and turn them into a goalie. Okay. So that's usually the first frustration is a coach looks at a goalie and goes like, my God, how do I work with this? So then the coach is conflicted because what happens is coaches fall into 3 categories, just like they fall into the 3 key abilities that if you go to athletespecific.com and you download my presentation there, the athlete success framework or the 3 key abilities frame, like all that, go get that if you haven't seen it yet. Okay. Um, but the idea is that your coaches fall into the same categories as are the 3 key abilities. So you have every athlete has 3 key abilities: a physical ability, a technical ability, and a tactical ability. So quick recap there, like physical ability is your physical ability to do the thing you need to do. Okay. Your technical ability is doing that thing. Right. So the thing for us right now in this conversation is lacrosse goaltending. Right. And then you have a tactical ability, which is how well you can do the thing you want to do physically in a team environment, like on the field of play. It's like one thing to have like Karen be able to do wall ball. It's another thing for Karen to be able to do an outlet pass when she's got a defender in her face and her team's down by 12 in the fourth quarter. That sort of thing. Okay. So physical, technical, tactical. So your coaches fall into those categories, right? So you have and there's some crossover, and this is what causes the problem. So physical ability, like you have a strength and conditioning coach, okay, or personal trainer. Not a fan of using that word anymore. Okay, I think we've kind of outgrown the word personal trainer. Having a qualified strength and every athlete should have a qualified strength and conditioning coach. Okay, now if you've got a coach, a technical coach like your lacrosse coach, your goalie coach, who also has a background in strength and conditioning, well, then you can have some crossover. The problem is when we try to do all of that in one session. Okay, and that's where ladder drills kind of fall into play. It's so basically what ends up happening is a coach, let's say a coach has, um, if it's a one-on-one session, like it's a coach and a goalie, and you're working for like an hour. Well, a coach is like going like, Jesus, I can't shoot for an hour, right? And I can't have this kid standing around. So we got to do something. So what can we do to fill in the gaps? Well, and then it's a laundry list of things: juggling, jumping rope, ladder drills, you name it. Let's do it, right? Or then you have a coach who's working with like a bunch of goalies. One coach, one shooter, like or the coach is the shooter, and there's like 6 goalies in line. Well, you don't want them standing around. So it's like, well, what can we do to fill all that dead space? Because if you're a good coach, you don't want a kid standing around, and I get it. But because lacrosse goaltending is it's not an endurance position. Okay, people kind of get shocked by that. Lacrosse goaltending is not an endurance position; it's an explosive position that we have to repeat over and over and over again. So, so there's a difference. All right, there's a difference. So if you train a goalie for endurance, then you're actually going to slow that goalie down. It's just you just have conflicting physical qualities, right? So the deal is that all right, um, you know, a coach is looking at a kid going like, all right, I just wish you were more athletic. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to have you do athletic things. And what can we do that are athletic things? Well, there's this, and then they look to gimmicks. They look to devices. They look to balls to juggle or Hiko sticks to catch or blaze pods. Like, I'm not against blaze pods if they're set, in a different in a coordination. Like, I'm not trying to like do push-ups on the ground and try to move my hands real fast. It's not the deal, right? We're not trying to have fast hands, we're not trying to have fast feet, right? And I'll explain that in a second. But the idea is that coaches, like especially coaches who aren't well versed in strength and conditioning, they look to gimmicks and gadgets, and that's wrong. Okay, I don't know how else to say it. It's wrong. Now, what ends up happening is that people they look at ladder drills just like they look at jumping rope, right? So you say like, okay, well, uh, what other athletes have fast feet and fast hands? Well, like a boxer does, and they go, well, what do boxers do? Well, boxers jump a lot of rope. Oh yeah, well, jump rope. Okay. Then ladder drills have kind of come into play, and ladder drills have been around for a really long time. And so you see football teams use it, you see some soccer teams use it. I will just tell you personally, in my own experience, the only people who are good at ladder drills are the people who train doing ladder drills a lot. And that usually means soccer players, okay, or football players. But really, in football, the thing that gets the most athletic development are those raised rope ladders or the mini hurdles where an athlete is actually trying to get their knees up in the air. The only ladder drill that really is applicable that actually has an impact on an athlete for lacrosse is where they're doing like an icky shuffle. Okay, so just Google icky shuffle. I'm not going to look it up for you. Just Google it. Okay, but the idea here is that ladder drills are kind of like the last thing you need to go to, because if you're going to take a goalie, so the first thing you got to understand is your goalie may be having a hard enough time learning how to stop the ball, right? It may be enough for your goalie to just be in a set position, properly centered between the ball and the goal, right? And now they're going to try to, fundamentally move properly in front of the ball. That might be enough for them, right? That might just be like the glass is full. They don't have any room for anything else, right? No mixer, no ice, no cherry on top. They're just like full, right? So you don't need for that goalie doesn't need a ladder drill. Okay. Now, if you got a goalie who's a little bit more advanced, maybe they've been playing goalie for a while, but they're not all that athletic. Then the question is like, well, what's the cost benefit of me putting in a ladder drill right now? And some people say like, well, and I pissed off a ton of coaches a couple of years ago by saying ladder drills are a waste of time. And all these, coaches out of Maryland and Long Island were like, I've had my goalies do ladder drills for a year and they're all Americans. They're not all Americans because you gave them the ladder drill. They're all Americans because they've been playing lacrosse since they were like 6. They probably played football in the fall, maybe basketball in the winter, and now they're not, the ladder drill didn't do it, right? It's not a causation, it's just a weird little correlation, and you probably actually retarded their development in some ways. Okay, so I'm going to explain that. Okay, so the thing to understand here is that when coaches go to the ladder drill, they're really just wishing their goalie was more athletic. So, how do you properly do that? That's the question. Well, I'm going to do it by having my goalies go through a well thought out movement prep before practice. Now, this is not a dynamic warm up. The dynamic warm up idea got completely bastardized in the early 2000s and into the 2010s, because I won't get too deep in that, but the bottom line is like when you see like your little kids going out doing a dynamic warm up, that warm up is not having enough of an impact physically on your kids, right? They need something that is more, that is usually more stationary, that is usually more defined. It's usually more intent. There's more intention to it, rather than just swinging their legs or swinging their arms, right? So we want to have a good movement prep. Then we want to go. We want to have some sort of basically sprint based activation, right? Because why? Well, we're trying to get your kid, and guys, when I say your kid, I'm also talking about like Division 1 goalies it would shock you where the lack of athleticism some Division 1 goalies show and some pro goalies show. I'll I'll throw that out there, right? That's where I feel like the lacrosse goalie of the future is going to be a goalie who is much more athletic, develops that athleticism to the best of their ability, right? And then they can basically showcase that in front of a ball. Okay. So we want to have those two components prior to. Then we're going to work on getting the goalie like just properly moving in front of a ball. And that usually is best taught without a stick, right? And not one hand behind the back, just naturally getting their hands out and having them move like they would if they were guarding your TV in the living room. Okay, seriously. Okay. So so what ends up happening is coaches don't spend enough time doing that, right? Why? Because there's this pressure. The kids want to get shot on. They just want to jump right to the technical. The coaches just want to run right to the technical too. They don't want to waste all that time, right? Because it takes a serious athlete to put in the time to do a proper warm up. And warm ups do not get shorter as you get more elite, they actually get longer. All right. Just Google the warm up and movement prep for a Olympic 100-meter sprinter. Right. I think we would all agree that that an Olympic sprinter is probably one of the best examples of how explosive an athlete could be. The other one is Olympic weightlifters. Okay. Just Google like Olympic weightlifting warm up, right? And you'll see it takes a lot of time, right? Um, and your junior high kid, your high school kid, even your college kid is probably rolling up after hitting Subway on the way. They down some food. They might show up like in their street clothes and throw on their game shorts real quick and get in, and they'll warm up while they're getting shot on. The problem is, the problem is that they are not. They're basically playing the position with a cold body. So we're not developing much athleticism anyway. And so when they get shot on now, it's like, well, okay, they're barely warmed up, right? So you're basically learning how to play the lacrosse goalie position with a cold body, a cold, inflexible, tight, whatever sorts of like movement restrictions they have, and that's it. So if you want to develop athleticism in your goalie, you're going to take that kid and get them as mobile as they can be prior to them getting in the cage. Okay. Then once they're in the cage, you are going to work on wiring the goalie, right? The proper wiring of the goalie. Okay. Shot stick side high, stick side hip, off stick, whatever. Right. Now, then we can add in more game ready scenarios, like um, more game applicable. So Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots talks about like situational football. I call this situational goaltending. It's like, all right, like, so listen, here's what we're going to do. We're going to imagine that there's a player who's dodged from X to side left or to back left. And when they get, and we're going to talk about this kind of the next video tonight, when they get to a certain point, you're going to pivot, right? And then we're going to imagine a pass coming up top. One of the problems right now that is just ruining a lot of goalies' understanding of this is where you have like the goalie standing kind of on a 45-degree angle from the back of the cage, and they feed to a coach up top or a shooter. And I see goalies standing in the worst possible situations. Like they're standing in positions that are not applicable to the game of lacrosse. And it's actually, again, going back to like what I said, we're either creating great habits or bad ones. Okay. Great habits or bad ones. So you've got to always be mindful of like, well, what habit am I influencing here? Okay. Another problem with just ladder drills in general is that usually they are reinforcing the feet moving under the upper body, under the body, not the body moving over the feet, which is what we're trying to do, right? As a goalie, I'm trying to explode to my left, explode to my right. I'm trying to move my hands, my arms, my torso over my feet, right? Ladder drills, basically, if you watch most kids and you see, guys like they're doing it with the stick in their hand and their feet are just moving underneath them, and that's useless. Like it's useless. And if anything, it's just creating bad habits, limited range of motion, all that stuff, right? So if you're going to use a ladder drill, like if you're going to create athleticism, and you're going to use that ladder drill as a tool, and I should just full disclosure, like there's a lot of strength and conditioning coaches, and I'm one of them, who just go like, there's a million ways to develop athleticism in a player before we even get to that ladder drill. Okay. So I'm gonna have more impact on that kid if I get him into a weight room, right? Teach him how to squat, teach him how to deadlift, right? Teach him how to lunge and all those things. That is worth 10 times more than the time they spend in a ladder. And if you're adding that ladder prior to them getting shot on, it's like, well, wait a second. What goalie have you ever seen do these little baby choppy steps, before they get into position, right? Never, right? If anything, a goalie's making some massive move to get, like big hip opening moves, right? That's what you should be working on, right? So if your coach is using those drills, like one, if your coach listening to me right now and you use ladder drills, just toss it. Hey, think of game scenarios and have your goalie move in like they're imagining that situation, and then they're going to get in position to save your shot wherever you are on the field, right? Be more creative, because the other thing that I've seen is where goalies will do a ladder drill, and then the ladder drill will lead to them in front of the goal, but the ladder will put them in the wrong place based on the shot they're getting taken. So don't do that. Okay, don't do that. Couldn't get to a note here. Sean Ciotti writes, youth players like my 11-year-old son, though, are very uncoordinated right now. So the jump rope is working on him controlling legs and arms in a rhythm. Not saying it's position or sport specific, just helps with their klutziness. Okay. So to that point, Sean, um, I don't like, so I, I just haven't seen that translate effectively, but you've got a point. I want to cover this point because ladder drills are designed for sequencing. Okay. There is a rhythm between and a coordination between the upper body and the lower body. Right. And so when you see ladder drills done properly, the hands move. And so if you're going to put a goalie into a ladder drill, like let's say you're going to take 5 minutes before practice and you're going to like, okay, listen, I like the ladder drill for coordination. Okay. Um, and so, Sean, to your point, I would get rid of the jump rope, and I would do because the jump rope is just reinforcing a very tiny range of motion. So what you think is fixing klutziness, like it, I disagree. I disagree. Okay, it's like having an artist use a pencil in the lower left hand corner of the canvas. That's kind of what you're doing. All right. If you want to get them into a ladder and teach them icky shuffle, teach them hand sequencing to do that. That is a better choice. Okay, that is a better choice. But again, I would not be like spending too much time on it. All right, and also the core, like what strength and conditioning coaches will tell you is that the the coordination they're learning is very specific to that drill, to jumping rope, right? And they're basically bouncing up and down and flicking their wrists in a tempo. That's it. Okay. All right. So there's people think like that, develops like eye hand coordination. No, no way. All right. So while I know what you're saying, all right, it's like you've got an 11-year-old who's not the most coordinated thing on the planet. That's fine. All right. But there's lots of things to do like prior to you getting to the jumping rope. What I find a lot of times is that there's a dad who jumps rope, likes to jump rope, wants to teach his kid how to jump rope. That's cool, but just be mindful that there's you're just basically doing plantar flexion and wrist, like you'd probably be better off getting him into a drum kit, right? Right? Because then we get our hands way out here, we get our feet working, right? And then we're working on tempo. And there's something to be said for that. Okay. Um, but yeah. So anyway, I think it's a great point. It's so you're developing some sort of athleticism, some sort of coordination, but I think there's better ways to do that. Okay. But if he's, you're not going to kill him if he's, you know, trying to jump rope for 5 minutes a day, whatever. But The idea is just understand that hard pass on drums. You can get those. You can get they're synthetic, like they're and they basically they're rubber, and so you can Bluetooth from your AirPods into the drum kit, so your parents never hear 'em. But like that's seriously that to me is probably more applicable to a lacrosse goalie than jumping rope ever will be. Okay, um, so yeah. So the other thing too about rhythm, Sean, and everybody listening is there's an absolute plague across lacrosse goalie camps and clinics where you see two goalies facing each other and they've got a ball each and they're just like tossing it to each other and they're in this like so the problem with rhythm is when there's rhythm then there's very little dexterity involved. Like when you're in tempo, there's very little reactivity, there's very little change of movement, and as lacrosse goalies, we are reacting. We can't be caught in rhythms, all right? Because if we get stuck in a rhythm, we might get caught off guard when the shooter is out of the rhythm we're expecting, right? So those drills, people think, like, oh, yeah, these drills, eye-hand coordination, man. Like, it's crap. It's total window dressing, and parents fall for it all the time. Okay, the whole eye-hand coordination, like in my opinion, the whole eye hand coordination like whatever business is just based on gimmick and window dressing. I just have not seen it. Um like just from a personal example, when I was at the Olympics, okay, Bausch and Lomb, right, was an Olympic sponsor, and they had a facility set up at the Olympic Village, and they had a they had a study going on where they tested all of the Olympians who wanted to get tested. It was just totally optional. But I tested in the top 2% of visual acuity for all Winter Olympic athletes. Okay. And so that involves like shooters and biathletes and all this stuff, like whatever. But then they paired that later that year or the next Olympics games. And so I tested in the top 2% of all Olympic athletes for visual acuity. So the thing is that when you're as a goalie, visual acuity is like one part of the equation, right? Eye-hand coordination is one part of the one part of the equation. The idea in lacrosse is we've got to see the ball, we got to understand where it's going, and then we've got to move in front of it, right? And so it's that piece that people think takes all sorts of like, your kid's not trying to stop something tiny. When they understand the language of lacrosse, they're actually moving in front of it, with more of an understanding. Like you're not trying to pick that little ball out of the air, you're just trying to save that space it's coming in front of. And when you relax the eyes, not focus when you relax the eyes, then it's you actually have better results. Okay. So the idea here, guys, is the if you're going to use the ladder drill, okay, if you're going to use the ladder drill, the idea is put the stick away, take the helmet off, get the chest protector off, right? Get the pads off, get in the ladder and work on it. Get the head up, right? I see kids like staring at their feet with their stick in their hands, and I'm like, yeah, that's all just bad habits. All right, get loose, get into it and go like, okay, right now we're going to work on sequencing. We're going to work on coordination, and the hands got to move like this as the feet move like that. Like that's a better use of that time. Okay. Um, I had a lacrosse goal university client a couple years ago who, he put a ladder in the kid's hallway from the bedroom to the bathroom. And the kid, every time he went down the hallway to take a leak, he had to use the ladder. That's cool. Whatever. But the idea was sequencing and all that stuff. Okay. All right. So that help? I hope that helps. Because I'll be honest, I see it. I just see it. It's a time filler. It can be a waste of space, and if anything, it limits. Oh, one last thing, specificity, right? If your goalie is above and beyond, like athletically, not like Sean's kid, but if your goalie is coordinated, if your goalie is up and running and moving and whatever, um, then you don't need the ladder drill. You need more athletic, dynamic. That ladder drill can actually be limiting you, okay? Limiting you and holding you back, and I don't want that for your goalie, okay? So really important. All right, guys, thanks for watching and thanks for listening wherever you are. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you like this, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. When you're ready, head on over to lacrossegoalieuniversity.com/coaching so I can work with you and your goalie. And while you're at it, check out athletespecific.com to learn more about mental performance and high performance. You may not know this, but I work with athletes in a variety of sports. Lacrosse is my love, but man, I love athletes and the families who support them. So head on over to athletespecific.com, check it out. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.